Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Sunday Chats. It's another episode brought by me, George Cummings. I'm so sorry, I don't know what that was. Do forgive me. And I will warn you all now, as opposed to last time where I mainly just yapped about what I've been up to. This is going to be a very political one, mainly because I am not a happy chappy. Okay, and there are two main things for this. There's three things I'm going to speak about today. We're going to have two quite miserable conversations, or at least quite grumpy conversations, because I am very annoyed at two main things, those being euthanasia and the sort of success of people in favour of euthanasia in managing to get that through government, and then also I am rather annoyed about the voting age for the upcoming general election being lowered to 16 years of age. And I'll explain my points for those in a second. And then we are going to end on a positive note, I promise you, because we're going to be talking about the fact that I have hit 50 subscribers. So last time and a couple of times before that, I mentioned that I'd like to get to 50 subscribers before the end of August. August hasn't even started, and yet here we are, we're at 50. So, I suddenly spiked over 2 days, and yeah, but I'll talk more about that and what my plans are for that in a bit. But yes, the first couple of issues, forgive me if I'm a bit frazzled. It's quite late as I'm recording this, and I've been busy today. But the first couple of issues. Oh, one other thing actually. No, okay. Just trying to think of the best order in which to say this. So before we dive into the issues, one other thing as well is that I'm thinking of, if I haven't, then I've probably just forgotten to, in which case I apologise, but I'm thinking of making this video release at 8 PM instead of 9 PM. So if I've done that, let me know how you feel about that. Let me know whether you think it's the right decision. And yeah, just give me your honest thoughts, because it's something that I've been thinking maybe it would encourage people to watch it more if it wasn't so late in the evening when I uploaded them. So yeah, just let me know what you think of the change. Thinking of putting it from 8 to 9, from 9 to 8. If you want it to go back, tell me. If you want it to stay, tell me. I'm probably going to lean on keep it at 9 unless people are in favour of 8, so please make your opinion very vocal, especially if you do like the change. Otherwise I will assume that people don't. That being said, euthanasia, votes for 16 plus, and 50 subs. Let's dive straight in. Okay, so starting then with euthanasia. There are two main reasons why, and also feel free to critique me as much as you want in the comments. That's sort of what this is for, so that we can have a bit of debate, a bit of back and forth. So yeah, that's not banned at all. But there are two main reasons why I am completely against any current government euthanasia policy, or any really attempts by this government to get euthanasia legalised. The first one is very simple, ultimately quite upsetting, ultimately quite miserable to think about, but I simply don't trust the government that much. I don't trust them not to cock it up. And I've got a couple of statistics here. First of all, and this is not saying that these are inherently wrong, that this shouldn't be the case, but Canada, for example, has basically come under a lot of slack, or at least did when they first sort of legalized euthanasia, which they did in 2016, because they were basically accused of not following the safeguards properly, and it being a very loose and open system. And I mean, they did a check on how it's going in 2023, and they found that 1 in 20 medical deaths. I'm actually just going to check his medical deaths just a second. Forgive me. Oh, no, we are running. Okay, forgive me. I've actually understated it. Not 1 in 20 medical deaths, but 1 in 20 deaths total. That 5% of all deaths now in Canada are a result of euthanasia. Um, I can't be bothered to do a definition because we're already 5 minutes in. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Very sorry. Essentially, it is assisted suicide in a medical context. So, for example, if someone's in chronic pain, they might choose to end their own life because they think, oh, I'm not going to get any better. I may as well, and I'm living in a miserable situation, I may as well top myself. Which, to be quite frank, I mean, obviously I've not been in it, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh yeah, no, I know what it's like to be in terrible suffering, because no, I don't. And I genuinely hope to never be in such a situation, and I cannot sit here and swear to you honestly that I wouldn't try and end my own life if I was in such a situation. But I do not trust the government to not let this spiral out of hand, because quite frankly, a collective number of governments, and I don't think that this is a partisan issue at all. I don't think this is a matter of Labour or Conservative. I just think that the government in general shouldn't be trusted with make the decision on who should and shouldn't end their own lives. I don't think they should. And I mean, look, it doesn't even take me that long to come up with some like things that the government's bollocked in the last sort of, or at least it's been made public that they've absolutely bollocked stuff in the last few years alone. I mean, we've got first of all the post office scandal. I don't know how familiar everyone is with that. Admittedly, I'm not really with it on the specific details of these, but I know enough to know that they are absolutely government cock-ups. There's the post office scandal, right? I don't know who saw this in the news, but while I'm not necessarily going to sit here and say she's innocent, a lot of the medical data basically used to convict Lucy Letby was found to be like completely out of date, and so actually the sort of people in the court procedure that went through that trial came under a lot of flack themselves for basically having ignored like medical research and not properly taken evidence into consideration. So the Lucy Letby trial, even if she was guilty, was ultimately not fair, it seems. Correct me if I'm wrong, correct me if that's been disproven, please. And ultimately, I'm not going to go into the details here, but I have my own few, not myself personally, but members of my family, experiences with the NHS not doing their job. And there's no more broad, not in the terms of necessarily misdiagnoses, but just in terms of generally being dicked by the system. So, I mean, this is a terrible thing to have to admit, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the NHS is like a terrible organisation. This isn't me saying, you know, screw public healthcare, we should just all be private, goodness no. But I ultimately do not trust the NHS to decide who is or isn't healthy enough, or ill enough, I suppose it would be, forgive me, to have the right to end their own lives. I simply don't. And misdiagnoses are not at all uncommon. People pull through at the last moment when they're not expected to have any chance of survival. Not all the time, of course. It's not the most common thing in the world, but it's a significant enough minority of cases that it would be an awful shame if people who could have otherwise lived or could have otherwise recovered are killed, are allowed to end their own lives. And so yes, the first reason is that I don't trust the government, and the second is I'm probably going to take a quick drink break before I go into this. I'm generally quite opposed to the logic behind euthanasia because I think it leads to some nasty conclusions. Okay, so I should probably explain a bit what I mean by that, and that is and admittedly, look, I understand that part of this does involve putting words in other people's mouths. So that is an obvious disclaimer with this point. But a large part of the reason why people advocate euthanasia is that people's quality of life is so low if they're in some sort of chronic pain that it's almost, there's no inherent value in preserving it. And this goes into a lot what I do in A-level RS in the euthanasia topic, because I do this in A-level RS, and it's the idea of sanctity of life, which is generally used to advocate against euthanasia, and quality of life, which is generally used to advocate for euthanasia. And so, if anyone that's like an A-level religious studies or possibly A-level philosophy students watching this, they're probably thinking, well, okay, this is obvious, mate, I already know this. Well, I'm sort of making something for everyone, not just you, so get over yourself, get off your high horse. Forgive me, I'm sure you weren't thinking that, but, but quality of life is essentially the idea, and this is a bit of an oversimplification, but I'm going to simplify for the sake of a shorter video, that if your life is that poor because you're in chronic pain, as in the quality of your life, as in your day-to-day experience, as it were, then it's not inherently worth living, or at least that it would be valid for you to want to end your own life. And I mean, ultimately, that in of itself is not. I don't know. I don't know if I want to agree with it. I don't think I agree with it because I don't like the conclusion that it takes us to. But I don't think that it's a terrible argument in of itself. However, the one thing that always confuses me about quality of life based arguments is that there seems to be this hard divide drawn, and this is with euthanasia, but also generally with human understanding of suffering. There does seem very often to be this sort of strong divide between what is physical suffering and what is mental suffering. And I must be frank with you, I don't see this as a particularly valid divide. I mean, this is very much based off of people's accounts of suffering, but given that I'm very much of the opinion that pain is a subjective thing, which the nature of pain and what it is, I'd happily do in another video, so let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in hearing. But, sorry, I thought I heard someone. But, forgive me, I got a bit thrown off, I thought I'd heard someone say something. But, so let me just pause and regain my thoughts, forgive me. Sorry, given that I'm of the opinion that the most important thing really when trying to understand pain is sort of the subjective account of it, I do think that ultimately accounts of it, or the subjective experience of it, rather, I do believe that ultimately accounts of what pain is like should be taken into consideration quite strongly. And let's face it, a lot of accounts of pain don't seem to draw such a sharp divide between the physical and the mental pain. I mean, the reason for why there's no, it's quite clear that physical pain will lead to some sort of mental suffering, because let's face it, people generally don't like being hurt. At least as an intuitive level, that makes sense. But, I think that it's ultimately, it is also a two-way street, forgive me for stuttering a little bit. For example, when you have, accounts of extreme grief, you talk about people being in sort of physical pain, or feeling like, they are actually in pain as a result of their loss. Or, for example, here's one thing, is that when I get very nervous, and this is a very much a personal account, when I get very nervous at something, I always feel like, I think it's generally when I'm very nervous at something, I feel like I'm going to throw up. Or more recently, it's been sometimes I feel like I cannot breathe. Sorry, that's probably a bit personal, but ultimately, our understanding, at least on an intuitive level, of how suffering works doesn't seem to draw this sharp divide between mental and physical pain. And so I fail to understand why quality of life as an argument, and the idea that if you dip below a certain quality of life it would not be a poor decision to end your life. I fail to see why that must apply solely to physical suffering. And yes, I mean, you could say, well, yeah, that's because you've had a physical response to an emotional stimuli. But I just flat out reject, because I fail to see the reason for it. And I hope that someone in the comments can clarify if there is a strong reason that I'm overlooking. But I fail to see the reason why there should be a sharp divide between mental and physical suffering in talking about what's serious enough to end one's own life. And so this opens up the possibility that people essentially would be valid in ending their lives just because they're miserable. Because, you know, if there's no difference between mental and physical suffering in terms of they're both suffering, you're both dropping below a quality of life, then what's the difference between someone with like a chronic pain and someone with some form of very strong depression or some sort of very strong other mental health issue? And yet it seems, and I understand a lot of this relies on what seems intuitive and what seems counterintuitive, which is poor of me because I generally consider that to be poor argumentation. So I hope you'll forgive me for that overlooking of the fact. Sorry, I just wanted to check something. But it seems like an invalid distinction, and I think that if you take away that ultimately invalid distinction, then the idea that below a certain quality of life you can end it and you'd be valid to end it seems like quite a negative idea, because it's saying that, you know, if people are miserable or if they're suffering from some serious mental health issue, they would be valid to be killing themselves. And I don't think that the government or most sort of mental health professionals would want to encourage such an outlook. So, you know, I mean, yes, there are definitely like things you could argue against that point. I've brought it up to a couple of people. They have come up with responses. Ultimately, I don't think that those responses stand, but I would be interested to hear your thoughts, because those are sort of my two, and these aren't really backed up by philosophers, which is shameful of me as an A-level RS student, but those are sort of my two first instincts towards euthanasia. Is that I don't trust the government at all to get it right, because I honestly think that they would just, I think it gives them the opportunity, or it gives them the potential to bollock things too much. And ultimately, yes, it would reduce, like, it would potentially reduce like the amount of people suffering, but I think that it's quite unfair to allow for such a policy on the understanding that so much could go wrong and a minority could be so poorly affected. Actually, the word minority reminds me, someone, it was my godmother actually, told me about some very interesting stuff about how it could unfairly affect minorities, specifically those who struggle with the English language for a lack of ability to essentially communicate and properly navigate the system. But that is a topic. I mean, I can go into that. Leave a comment if you wish for me to. But ultimately, I've spoken so much about this topic, I think I need to move on. And then, yeah, I fail to see the difference between physical and mental suffering in terms of why one should constitute a drop in quality of life sufficient to end one's life, and why the other shouldn't. And I don't like the conclusion of that. Therefore, yeah, I think we've gone wrong somewhere on euthanasia significantly. And I would encourage people to do their own research into it, even if it's not something that you think will affect you personally, because it's not something that I think will affect Pardon, goodness me. It's not something that I think will affect me personally, but, I mean, it will affect others, and so why it shouldn't be looked into is beyond me. Anyway, I'm going to stop, take a brief pause, forgive me, and then we can go into my reasons for being quite annoyed about the changes to the general election. Right, okay, it's time for the next bit. I was thinking, I just took a break, went to fill up a water bottle, have a drink, have a bit of a rest before getting into this next part, because ultimately it's rather warm in here, and, sewer man, I wanted to take a break. But now I'm going to explain why I am really rather annoyed by Keir Starmer's decision to allow people of the ages of 16 and 17 to vote in the upcoming general election, and just why I'm opposed to 16 and 17 voters in general. And I appreciate, going in, I want to make it clear, I appreciate that I am mainly talking to people that are 16 or 17. There are probably some outliers, but the majority of the people watching this, I have no doubt, will be people that I know, that are or were in the same school year as me, and are therefore the same age as me, and are probably thinking, George, don't be a twat, don't take away my vote, I want that. And, look, I personally am obviously like a relatively politically engaged fellow. Sometimes I fail to keep up with current affairs, but in terms of like, politics as a whole, it's something that interests me. I intend to study at university, so I sympathise very much with wanting to get involved. However, I'm going to be honest. There's a multitude of reasons. There are partisan reasons. First of all, okay, this is the bit where I probably get a little bit of bollocking from quite a lot of people, but I support the Conservatives. Now, wait, please, wait. Don't put my head on a spike yet, okay? Right, I have. It is mainly because I disagree with most of the other parties, okay? I'm not particularly left-wing, so that rules out Labour and Green. I don't trust the Lib Dems, because ultimately they seem to stand for very little. They seem to say a lot, and then get in coalitions with whoever, and then follow whatever they say. And I think that their most recent coalition government ultimately is evidence of that. And I don't support reform because A, I'm not an idiot, but also B, because they've taken away like a large portion of the votes from the Conservative Party, which yes, I do have problems with. I want to make that very clear. But yeah, I think that ultimately ignoring the quite appalling incidents and policies that they find themselves walking into every now and then, often, they have also completely split the right wing of this country in half, and ultimately done far more harm than good. So, first of all, the partisan line on this is that I do not want to see reform getting a bunch more votes, which is ultimately what I see happening as a result of this policy. And maybe I'm going to be wrong. If I am, what do you expect? I'm a 17-year-old recording this at like 10:30 in the evening, after he's come back from working on some songs with his mates in a band, and ultimately I've got A-levels to do, and I'm not a political pundit, so get a grip. I mean, obviously, yes, it would be unfortunate if I got this wrong, but, if you're honestly looking at me for your, like, the majority of your political information, and I don't mean any disrespect to you, but I think you're rather foolish, because ultimately I don't know that much. However, yes, first of all, I think that this will just give votes to reform, which is not what Labour wants to do. The fact that they think that the majority of the youth are in favour of them, which seems to be, I failed to see how a Labour government would do this and quite a strongly Labour government, would do this if they did not think the youth would vote for them. But I don't think the youth will really vote for them. So that in of itself is quite silly. And also, I'm going to be honest, I don't think that the majority... in fact, no, I don't think that all young people are experienced enough at the age of 16 and 17 to basically know enough about their country and know enough about the world to vote. Because there's this whole thing, there's this idea of, oh, well, if you pay taxes, then you should vote. And I think that it's generally a good idea, right? I mean, I don't think that we should have large groups of society not having a vote just because they don't hit some ridiculous criteria. I think that that's ultimately undemocratic. But I think that there should be some sort of limitations to that. The first one, one of the big ones, is I just think that, honestly, 16 and 17-year-olds, myself included, and I am including myself in this, just don't know enough about the world. I mean, what's the most that we've done? We've gone through the education system. Some of us have got jobs or are, working at apprenticeships, but most of us across the country are still stuck in academia. Realistically, how much of the world have we been exposed to, right? And what I mean by that is, once you hit 18, you move out, you move to another part of the country, you speak to other people, you get to see other views, and I guess what I'm trying to say, and how I'd shorten it, is that because most people our age, myself included, haven't really seen that much of the world, or been around for that long, they've only heard a very limited number of perspectives. And I think that ultimately acts as a bit of a constraint in decision making. I mean, it's very easy for me to sit here and say, oh, look at me, I'm rising above it all because I recognise the error in the ways of allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote, but I don't. I really don't hold... I mean, yes, I hold my opinions and my convictions, truly. Otherwise, I wouldn't hold them. I don't believe that what I'm saying is wrong, but I don't think that me being right on this issue is any indicator of my intelligence or greater awareness. It's just what I hold, the opinion I hold, based on the evidence I've got and the values that I believe in. So, yeah, I mean, yes, I'll give it to people. It's more democratic in the sense of, it gives everyone more of a say to allow 16 to 17-year-olds to vote. But I just don't, I just don't think we're wise enough. And that's, I know that makes me sound like a prick. Look at George, he thinks that we're all idiots. And I don't think you're idiots. I think that all of us, me included, are ultimately young and inexperienced and do not know the ways of the world. Because we don't. I mean, I think 18 to 21-year-olds, probably a lot of them fit that description. And there was a time where I was mentally toying with the idea of the age of voting being 21, but that felt borderline tyrannical and draconian, let alone impossible to actually pass as law. But yeah, I mean, that is... Ultimately, it's not a very detailed take. It's not very in-depth. But it's just, as you get on with life, you change a lot. I mean, I know that I was very radical in a lot of the views that I held in year 9 and year 10. I was a little tyrant. No, okay, I wasn't actually. I made a couple of silly mistakes and built up a reputation for myself as a bit of a radical. I was never as bad as people said, but some of the things that I held then as true, I would not now. I actually think a lot of that's religion. I think that's petered me out a little bit, but that's besides the point. I mean, obviously that's very important, but the point I'm trying to make is that, as you get a bit older and as you move on in life, you mature a bit and you realise that a lot of your past convictions were false. And I'm not saying that we should only give pensioners the vote because they've got the most experience. But I think that ultimately, you know, 18 is the age where we consider people to be adults. It seems like a reasonable cut-off point. And I think that it's quite... I mean, I don't see it being that impactful anyway, because as someone pointed out to me, a friend of mine, um, ultimately, most people our age group, or most people 18 to 21 don't vote anyway. About half of people our age I saw on the BBC said that they don't really want the vote. Um, so I don't see it being that impactful. But on a matter of principle, I wanted to come out and say I think that we're too dim. Sorry, that's a bit. It's obviously that's a bit tongue in cheek, but the long and short of it is I just don't think we know enough to have the vote, or we just don't have enough life experience. Yeah, it's probably a miserable, slightly elitist sounding take, but it's the one I have, so, you know, sue me for it. I don't want to ramble anymore. I can't really think of anything that I didn't say, so I'm going to cut that short, take a quick drink break, and get back to you all in a second. So you've got to understand that when I record these, my windows and my door are closed, and my computer's on. The windows and doors sort of stop noise coming in. And so it does mean that this room warms up rather quickly, which means that I need to drink rather often and take breaks. So I hope you are relatively accepting of that. But anyway, right, today's been a long one. I'm looking at the time, it's already almost 32 minutes in. Pardon me. But we did it. 50, I believe 51 subscribers. And for the life of me, I cannot tell you why. I mean, I don't consider the content I make to be very good, but you know, I've been told by some people that actually it is quite enjoyable to watch. I was told by someone recently, and I don't know whether to take it as a compliment or an insult, but I was told by them that I put them to sleep, and that I should get into ASMR because she watched my video, and you know, slipped off into the dreary land of Nod. So, you know, there we are. But yeah, I mean, I don't know where this has come from, truth be told. It's very strange to me, because it was probably... I mean, this time last year I had no social media at all. And so, to be making YouTube videos that, you know, get by the time they've been out for a few weeks, a solid 50 or so views, and to have 50 subscribers is a very odd thing. I mean, there have been plenty of odd moments. People have come up to me and asked me to talk about things in videos. People have made fan accounts of me. But I did not expect that we'd get this far this quickly. And so I just wanted to say thank you very much, everybody, for all of your support. Whether you've been just watching, or you subscribed, or you've left comments, especially those that have left comments. Thank you, Reese. I did talk about euthanasia. I know it's been 2 weeks, but I did talk about euthanasia. Anyone that's done any sort of support, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, because I did not expect that we'd get here this quickly. And so I wanted to ask you, what do you actually want me to do? Because I was originally thinking of doing a Q&A. And if people want to do a Q&A, then that's fine. And if they want to do a Q&A, I'd suggest that they leave their comments or their questions in the comment section, because I need questions to answer. But I had the realization that ultimately a lot of what I do is Q&A anyway. And so I could do a Q&A, but I don't feel as though it would be too special. If you disagree, tell me, and I'll happily do a Q&A. But I had that realization pretty much after I'd already hit 50, because when I saw I was getting close to 50, I thought I should come up with something to do for 50. And then I hit it and I thought, well, is a Q&A really going to be that interesting of a thing, or will it just be what I already do? I mean, it would be easy for me, but should it be easy for me? I mean, it's a celebratory thing. It's something for you guys. It's not something for me. It's a thank you present. So yeah, I guess let me know in the comments what you want me to do, because ultimately I'm quite lost as to what to do for this. I really, yeah, I'm completely in the dark. So I just wanted to end this video. I understand that I've probably upset quite a few people, actually. Well, not upset, but I have no doubt a couple of people have probably clicked off and thought this guy's a muppet, and they're probably right. But yeah, I mean, we've done it. We've hit 50, and I want to do something for you guys. I want to do a 50 sub special, but I'm lost on how to do it. So please let me know, A, what you thought of the things I've said today, and if you want to ask me any follow-up questions on that, like on my arguments, then go ahead, please do. But also, what do you want me to do for the 50 sub special? I think that's it. I think we're going to end it here. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. I appreciate it's been a long one. God bless you all. I hope you enjoy the summer holiday, which, praise the Lord, is approaching sooner rather than later. 2 days away when you're watching this. In fact, 2 days away when I'm recording this. School days, at least. And yeah, adios.